and welcome today. I'm Elizabeth Arnold. I work for the Candler Foundry, and I am here with Dr. Beth Corrie from Candler School of Theology at Emory University. And Beth has been one of the content coordinators of this fantastic track that we have produced called Essentials for Youth Ministry. Now, just a little bit of background. This particular track is part of a larger program that we call Foundations in Faith and Leadership. And what this program is an 8-month online certificate program. Each track, ranging from things such as peace building and conflict transformation, essentials for biblical interpretation, and our most recent one, Essentials for Youth Ministry, all are 4 courses curated in one track in order to give you, the participant, a micro-credential in that particular area of ministry. And so you can sign up to take one of these tracks where you go at your own pace. You have a facilitator to guide you through the process and respond to questions. But you also get this extra training in whatever area of ministry or leadership you feel called to serve in best. And so today we're going to have a conversation about our newest track. And we're also going to, when we're finished, turn it over to you, the audience, and ask you what questions you have. This track is appropriate for anyone who has been to seminary, but maybe didn't get much on youth ministry, like a lot of ministers have.
Yeah.
Or if you've never been to seminary and you just feel called to serve with youth and teenagers, or maybe you have a teenager or plural teenagers, and you want to better understand how to be an adult in their life that's guiding them in faith. So without further ado, Beth, this is part of your work, not just at Emory, but in YTI. Is it Youth Theological Institute?
It's Youth Theological Initiative.
Youth Theological Initiative.
Yes,
Okay, so tell us, what is the Youth Theological Initiative?
Yeah. So the YTI, the Youth Theological Initiative, was founded actually 30 years ago in 1993. And it started as this dream that young people wanted to go into deeper questions about their faith, about theology, about the big questions that drive them, that they stay up at night worrying about, does God really exist? What does it mean for people who are not Christian? Why do bad things happen to good people? All the big questions that we wrestle with.
I worry about those things.
Exactly. And it said, let's bring them together on a college campus when they're in high school, living in a dorm, but living in a dorm with current seminary students who are equipped and eager to walk alongside them while asking these deep questions of faith. And so it sort of builds an intentional community of young people who want to wrestle with the big questions, who want to meet people who also care about having meaningful conversations like that. I mean, sometimes a young person has those questions, but their friends aren't interested in those questions, or, it's not cool to talk about it at school, or their youth group is not really where they are. And so this is the place where all the young people who want to be able to have those kind of conversations come together and find each other.
Oh my gosh, I wish that would have been part of my youth experience. I would have loved that.
I know, me too.
Yeah. And it's really interesting to me because so often the way culture portrays teenagers is that they're not interested in serious topics like theology or faith, or that if it's not fun or sort of frivolous, then they don't find it engaging. But this sounds like that actually pushes back on that notion that teenagers don't care about things that are important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've found, and I've been involved in YTI since 1996 in various ways. And so we're talking the last stages of Gen X, millennials, and now Gen Z. Always, there are young people who have deep questions. They're wrestling with identity, purpose, belonging, and that raises questions about, if I'm trying to figure out who I am, I need to figure out what that means to have been created by God. If I'm trying to figure out where I belong, then I got to figure out, what does it mean to be part of a religious community? If I'm trying to figure out what my purpose is, it's, who did God create me to be? And they have always wanted to ask these questions and have adults take them seriously. we can talk about this more, but part of the assumptions in this entire course that we've put together is that young people have deeper questions and they're yearning for trusted adults who want to walk alongside them to be able to entertain these questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you watching, just so you know, we will be sure to drop a link to the Youth Theological Initiative so that if you want to find out more about that, you can absolutely go, because it is still running, which after 30 years, you can't say that about every program.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is still gaining attention and is still helping young people in their walks of faith, and really being able to learn about this with their whole person, their minds, their spirits, that it's not just this compartmentalized, this is church time, spiritual time, but that it's even an intellectual thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is one of the best and strongest aspects of this track that you've developed. So I wonder if you could just tell us the 4 courses that are part of this track in helping people gain the essentials for youth ministry. You've actually targeted about learning about God or loving God with all the various parts of ourselves. So what do those courses look like?
Yeah. So Candler Foundry provided the structure of, we're going to have 4 different courses. And so when I started thinking about, okay, how do I design a course that's going to have 4 different courses in the track, I immediately went to the passage in Luke and Mark that says we are called to love God with all of our hearts, mind, soul, and strength. And so I organized it around that. So course 1 is about loving God and neighbor and youth with our hearts. And that's a way of saying, okay, in this course, we're going to focus on pastoral care. We're going to focus on what is it that's dividing us from young people? What are the cultural forces that play into stereotypes of young people and how that can get in the way of having meaningful relationships with them? But also just some practical tips about how to care with young people, and also how to care with young people who might be different from you, whether it's ethnically or in their sexual orientation or in their immigrant status, so that, in my experience, increasingly youth pastors or volunteers with youth groups will have a wide diversity of young people in their youth group. And so we're going to have some experts in the field come and talk about, what are some ways to be thinking about caring with youth across all these differences. So that's course 1. Course 2 is loving God with our minds. And that's where we really start to talk about pedagogy and learning and teaching, which is my wheelhouse that I love the most. But really thinking about, okay, how do you do Bible study? How do you do confirmation or other kinds of membership education as young people, depending on your tradition, as young people are kind of moving into a place where they can start accepting their faith on their own, as their own, and claiming that, so how do you pass on the tradition? What is liberative pedagogy? So how do we teach in a way that centers young people's ideas and passions and empowers them? Things like that. So it's about teaching. Then the 3rd course is about loving God with our souls. So that's focusing on worship, prayer, Sabbath. How do we think about spiritual formation with youth, spiritual and religious practices in creative ways, in ways that take seriously the importance of spiritual formation. And then the 4th course is loving God with our strength. So that's really focusing on ethics and, how do we live our faith out in the world? And how do we help young people make wise decisions as they discern how to act in the world? And also a little bit around something that's important to my own research is helping young people become sort of strategic, nonviolent activists, whether it's just sort of in their school or their church or in the world, because this is a growing movement of young people who care about making a difference in the world. So how do we as trusted adults help them do that in wise ways, in strategic ways, and in nonviolent ways that promote healing and liberation for everyone?
Oh, wow. What you just said reminded me of a statistic I had heard that Gen Z, this, generation that's teenagers right now, that they are the most diverse of all the generations that have been present in the United States, at least, and the most empathetic. And I feel like what a wonderful way by structuring loving God in all of these various ways, and this emphasis on diversity and activism is really seeing that empathy and seeing that diversity as their strengths and letting them capitalize on where they're uniquely situated in the world. And that's exciting. I have 3 Gen Zers myself as my children, and I can totally see this desire to impact the world in a new and special and yet very deep way. It's not superficial. That's what I'm noticing, is that they care about the stories behind things that are happening. So asking people not just to love God, but to break it down and love God in all these ways and that they're all related seems like a really holistic way to help train people to train young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what do you think, coming at it from the other side, when you look at, I mean, we've talked about what we see in, the generations of younger people. Now that I've been officially moved into the middle-aged Sunday school classroom, I'm like, I'm not a young person anymore. But what do you see as the struggles for people who are in youth ministry? Like, are there areas of struggle matching where the areas young people feel challenged the most? Or where are they feeling this, I'm not sure how to respond, I'm not sure how to prepare? Where do you see their challenges?
I think there's some really emergent ones, and then there's some that have been a long time coming and that are kind of flowering right now. The emergent one is youth pastors and pastors generally are talking about how difficult it is to get people back to church, right? We all, during the quarantine, stayed at home, got on Zoom, and a lot of people decided they liked it. They liked staying at home and doing church in their pajamas. And it's a struggle to kind of get people back in. And I think that it's also, because I've seen it in myself, a vicious cycle, right? So you lose touch with community, and that makes you depressed and lethargic. And then when community opportunities happen again, you're too depressed and lethargic to have the energy to go back out and do it. So you have to make yourself do it. And then I've had to do that, make myself do it, and realize, oh, wait, now I remember why I loved being in church in person. Now I remember why I loved going out to a meal with my friends. Now I remember why I love doing these things. And I think we're coming, it's starting to get better, but I think that is still a bit of a challenge. And one of the other things that is, that I'm hearing, particularly from campus ministers, is that they're seeing young people come in as freshmen in college and they don't know how to make friends because of the past 3 years. This really important moment in their development was truncated. And so we are seeing our social skills are not where they would normally be at the ages that we are. And even in myself, my social skills have regressed. And so I think this is a huge challenge, because as an adult, I'm like, I don't remember how to talk to a stranger anymore and to make small talk and to, not be weird. And, I'm starting to get better, but there were a couple of years where I was truly like, I'm not sure that I'm making myself understood, and I feel like I am a weirdo. And I think everybody was feeling that, and we're all being awkward, right? And so imagine what it would be like to have spent all of middle school at home, or, your freshman and sophomore of high school at home. That's a huge developmental hurdle, right? So that's a huge thing. And so I think, this is a challenge. How do we figure out how to make friends again? How do we figure out how to build community again? That's one thing. The other thing is the larger historical context, which I talk about a little bit in the course, is there's a generation gap that basically started in the 50s, and it has widened and widened and widened as time has gone by. And when you have, and I learned this from my studies in peace building and conflict transformation in other countries where there are different groups of people that war with each other. When you have two groups of people that have almost no contact with each other, all the stereotypes flood the gap. Right? And those stereotypes tend to be more negative than positive, right? And so if you look around and think about it, unless you literally have a teenager in your house like you do, or you work with teenagers on a daily basis, you could move through life as an adult and have zero contact with teenagers. Most adults probably have zero to very little contact with teenagers, right? And so if you have had not hung out with a teenager in a meaningful way in a long time or ever, what are you going to believe? You're going to believe the news reports, that they're all on their phones, that they're all lazy, that they're all spoiled, that they're all, you know, weird, that they are criminals, that they're doing drugs, that they're vaping, right? All those things fold into it. And so this is a much bigger context that we're stepping into. And so what happens is if you're an adult who sincerely wants to cross over that gap and make a meaningful relationship with a young person, you've got to also work on your own internalized assumptions, stereotypes, right? And the young people have to work on their own internalized about themselves and about adults, right? So all the things where we're like, kids today, Gen Zers are la la la, they're all like boomers, Gen Xers, they're la la la, right? And we're all wrong about each other. I mean, there's large trends and there's some truth always in stereotypes, but no one's a monolith, everybody's an individual, right? And so this is another huge thing, right? So how do we develop practices to recognize the social forces that are infusing our stereotypes of young people and move past that, right? And help them move past it so that they don't internalize the idea that they're too lazy to make a difference in the world, you know, that they are too young to have leadership in church, you know, that their voice doesn't matter, right? So we want to attend to both of those things. And then the other thing I wanted to mention about what I think is a growing challenge, and we started to talk about this, you mentioned, you know, it's the most diverse group of young people. It's also the most empathetic. And I think what that translates into is also one of the most politically active generations. And this is threatening in our larger society, right? So we've got sort of two reactions to this. If you see a really diverse group of young people who are like, climate change matters to us, we have to do something about it, guns matter to us, we're the ones who have to go to these schools, you know, LGBT rights, abortion, all of these issues, they see them as directly affecting them, right? And there's sort of larger political forces that are trying to tamp down that political power, try to circumscribe their voting rights and try to dismiss them. But there's also, even in our, those of us who are like, yay, young people are going to save the world, they're the people of the future. What I've also heard is that young people feel enormous pressure and burden by that. You know, they're like, I'm sorry, you guys keep saying we're the ones who are going to change climate change, who are going to deal with climate change. Why didn't you do it? You know, why are you leaving it to us? And so I think this is also a huge thing, because while we want to empower young people and support them in the things they care about, we also have to think about how is empowering them possibly stressing them out further, because we're sort of saying, oh, you're going to take care of all the stuff that my generation didn't do. Or, you know, how do we prepare them in ways that takes seriously the reality that there's a lot of folks that don't want them to speak out.
Yeah. No, one of the things that you mentioned in the track is the phrasing that you use is that you're learning to care for youth and with youth. And so there seems to be this component on developing your own self as a leader in your faith and growing in these very areas where you are also becoming more empathetic and learning how do I use my empathy in ways that benefit the world, but also don't drain me of everything, which is what I'm hearing you say, that they feel this pressure, they feel burnt out, but they also feel called to give. And so what I see in this track is that the same things that leaders need to teach kids is what they have to learn alongside them.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a couple of modules in that first course where my colleague Jill Weaver really goes deep into empathy and what we need to be doing to help develop a deeper capacity of empathy for ourselves, as well as empathy empathy in ourselves and empathy for ourselves. Like that is exactly to your point, that we have to have empathy for ourselves in order to resource ourselves well enough so that we can be prepared to be truly empathetic for the young people we're caring for.
Wow. I mean, already, I don't know of anybody who wouldn't benefit from this track.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, anyone who, like you said, just cares about the world in general, could honestly benefit from this, as well as people who are actively in ministry or actively working with young people. It looks like we have a question online. One of our viewers asked, are these courses United Methodist based or another denomination?
Great, thanks for that question. It's very intentionally ecumenical. Yes, I personally am involved in the UMC, but it is not denominationally tied. You know, if you noticed earlier, because EB is Baptist, and we had a long conversation about confirmation because she's like, "Oh, we don't do confirmation," and I had to really take a step back and say, "Oh gosh, I have to write this module in a way that takes seriously that some people are coming from traditions that practice infant baptism and then use confirmation as a sort of part 2 of that." And then there are folks who practice adult baptism, believers baptism, you know, do it differently. We all have the goal of trying to help young people, pass on the tradition to young people, but we do it differently. And so I've learned a lot from EB about thinking about this ecumenically.
Well, and I learned so much because it forced me to also realize that while they may look different in their expression, of course, our church does a 5th grade promotion into the youth group as a transition from the children's ministry. And a lot of the things that I realized we were doing are the very parts of confirmation that happen in other churches, which is settling your identity as part of this larger community in a new way, even though, of course, we've wanted children to see themselves as part of the church as children, but to see them take the ownership of that.
Right.
And to decide what kind of, how they're going to spend their identity in the church. You know, how are they going to put back in, or how are they going to carve out this space for themselves, and what's important to them and to their generation?
Yeah.
And so I realized, oh, all churches do this. We just call it something different.
Right.
So if you are thinking about being part of this track, if you're thinking about signing up, any denomination or even no denomination.
Right.
Is honestly going to be just fine, because there are accommodations where any of the speakers in the tracks may say, now in my faith tradition, we practice confirmation like you do in the Methodist church, whereas in the Baptist church, we do a membership promotion when that child makes that transition into the youth group. So it doesn't matter which way you're coming from. The whole point is that all of these principles on how to listen and care for and care with and learn from and learn with young people, those are going to be really the strengths that everyone can draw from.
Yeah. And I'll just add that the readings that are part of it and some of the scholarship that we draw from are from people from every denomination. So it really is informed ecumenically. And I would also say that when we kind of plant ourselves someplace theologically, it always is in Scripture. And I do that because that is the one common place that we can all kind of come to.
We're just so grateful to have Dr. Beth Corrie with us, so grateful for all of the people who have collaborated on this track. We have wonderful professors at Emory and other people that have been part of this, that care about not only young people, but all people, and are looking forward to seeing what really amazing things this generation is going to do. And this track is a way that all of us who aren't part of this young people group at the time, this is a way for us to be part of it.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Beth, for being here. And thank you all for being with us today.
Yeah. Thank you.